Well, welcome to our session 2 on Model Code of Ethics for Educators. My name is Paul Fox. I think this is close to my 5th decade in education. And with me today is my colleague and friend, Thomas Bailey. We are attorney at law, former social studies teacher, and actually he's the creator of the PIL and Act 48 courses that we do on ethics in education for Pennsylvania educators. Today, we're going to talk about MCEE, the letters standing for Model Code of Ethics for Educators. Did you know that according to Edutopia, teachers make as many decisions as 1,500 snap judgments in a given day when they're at school? Everything from what to teach, who to teach, how to teach it, how to assess, everything to their concepts, to providing emotional support for the students and dealing with classroom management. Now, most of these decisions are instant, choices in the moment. And then this can lead to something that New York Times has called decision fatigue. So our professional compass for making wise choices on these relies on something an educator expert, I think he is, Troy Hutchings, in education calls ethical equilibrium, balancing personal morality with group ethical standards, with regulations, codes of conduct and the law, and professional aspirations. This means that could be a time when you are kind of given an issue, or I call it ethical conundrum, a dispute, not sure how to proceed. For example, these questions. Would it be in a student's best interest to ever ignore an infraction he or she made of an existing law or policy? Well, I will throw at you the movie Lean on Me, where the administrator, the principal, locked all the doors to keep the drug pushers out, and he was eventually thrown in jail. It's a good movie. How do you communicate an honest, unbiased appraisal of a poorly performing student without totally demoralizing him or her, especially if she lacks self-confidence, is fragile, or prone to giving up? The way you approach a student. Do you ever say, oh, you're doing pretty good? Are you always fair in your assessments, totally brutally honest? How do you address the risks or harm of being too close to your students? You really want what's best for your students in your class, but are you aware of the vulnerabilities of crossing the professional boundaries in student-teacher relationships? Another movie, Mr. Holland's Opus, where a teacher who's sending a student to New York to see if she can find her fame and fortune in singing, he kisses her goodbye. That's all I need to say. Violation of boundaries. How do you respect a student's privacy rights while mitigating the dangers of meeting with him or her alone or in unsupervised settings to resolve a problem? Students having a meltdown in the hallway, but you do have to be worried about confidentiality, and you have to pull that student in somewhere where the rest of the students don't hear what's going on. Those are some of those conundrums or issues that may come up. So to deal with these, we have 2 kinds of codes to provide guidance to meet our everyday responsibilities. Admittedly, few educators know these. I would say that I could go in front of a bunch of college students and hold up a $50 bill and say, anybody know the name of your code? And I'd hear crickets. In fact, I've never lost $50 this way. There's the code of conduct, which is specific, black and white absolutes, do's and don'ts, regulating our behavior, our language, our decision-making, even our attitudes, one might say, violations of which can result in disciplinary action. Everything from a minor reprimand being written up to being major issues, being fired, criminal civil prosecution, or even losing our license to teach. That's the code of conduct. And in Pennsylvania, the code of conduct is called the Code of Professional Practice and Conduct. In session 3 next week, this will be covered by Tom, so we'll be in good shape. The other code, though, and frequently is the last one we think of, is called the Code of Ethics, which is more of an abstract gray area sounds like mission statements, ideals, or principles based on the context of a situation. It provides a framework of recommended standards to help guide our decision-making. So it's not the minimum standards or requirements. It's not the lowest bar. Don't do these things or you'll be in trouble of mandates or prohibitions to which all educators must adhere. Now, unlike some other professions, doctors and particularly come to mind, they had a code of ethics at the end of the 1800s, helping them just make decisions during, I don't think it was the Asian flu or something. We had big problems and they had to figure out how to deal with resources of the medical care at that time. We haven't had a code of ethics. This is a more recent event in Pennsylvania. Now we do have an internationally approved universal, steering us towards sound judgment, serving as our ethical decision-making compass. And what it's called? Model Code of Ethics for Educators by the National Association of State Directors of Teacher Education and Certification. So the first thing I need to do is to share my screen, because I want to show you, you can always teach a man to fish, right? I need to show you where exactly this is on the website so you can find it for yourselves. So you should be able to see this. This is the Professional Standards and Practices Commission of Pennsylvania. And I would say this is the official Pennsylvania government website, it says so. And you'll see there's three big menu items up here at the top. Disciplined systems, statutes, regulations, forms, and ethical practices. I heartily recommend you go to this website. It has lots of good information. Tom is going to refer to this website a lot in the next couple sessions. Go to the statutes and regulations and slide down to Model Code of Ethics for Educators right here. And this will pull up the official document. Now, if you would rather go to the horse's mouth, as they say, just go to Google and type in MCEE. Everybody has an acronym for everything. Model Code of Ethics for Educators. And this will take you to the NASTEC website. And it also has more background, which will be helpful. So the Model Code of Ethics for Educators. A little bit of history. In 1997, NASTEC, don't mind if I use that, words, so many words there, established an annual conference devoted to the topic of educator ethics, as well as investigating and adjudicating educator misconducts. They were concerned about issues with certification across state lines. So that's probably where the organization was formed originally. This was called the Professional Practices Institute, PPI, and this was attended by attorneys, investigators, state directors, education prep providers, and district officials. Now, it was at these PPI events that early discussions were fueled, eventually led to the MCEE. And in 2012 to 14, NASTEC sponsored symposiums, webinars, and surveys to finally get a handle on it, coming up with universals that people would agree are ethics for educators. So in 2015, the first draft of MCEE was drafted. It was updated as recently as 2021. There are 5 principles, 18 sections, and 86 standards of what NASTEC calls a professional code developed by practitioners for practitioners in which to hold themselves accountable. These are the 5 principles: responsibility to the profession, responsibility for professional competence, responsibilities to students, responsibility to the school community, and responsible and ethical use of technology. In terms of who did this, just about any organization, major national organization in this country about education, National Education Association, American Federation of Teachers, the Elementary School Principals Association, the Secondary School Principals, Chief State Officers, Teacher Educators Association, College of Teacher Education, etc. They all got together and tried to come up with those points that pretty much everyone could agree. In 2017, the Pennsylvania Board of Education endorsed MCEE at one of their meetings, but not until 2021, I believe December 2021, was it fully adopted and has been disseminated through our channels, different PDE channels. Here's what it looks like. Now, those 5 principles are like spokes in a wheel. They're equal in importance. So don't look at the first one being more important than anybody else. But I would venture to say that we all probably are thinking the one that's called responsibility to students is most urgent. First principle, right? Principle 1, principle to the profession. Professional educator is aware that trust in the profession depends upon a level of professional conduct and responsibility that may be higher than required by law. This entails holding one and other educators to the same ethical standards. I don't know of a better way of making an introductory statement. So you see underneath that, one of the letters missing, A, the professional educator demonstrates responsibility to oneself as an ethical professional. B and C, those are sections, and under the sections or numbers we'll call our standards. So when I deal with this in our workshops, we do both Act 48 and Act 45 workshops. When we present the MCEE, I hear voices. Somebody says I might need to see my mental health professional. I hear voices about things that are not necessarily good, not correct or ethical attitudes from professionals. And actually, these are fictitious. Generally, I don't hear these things. For example, hey man, I didn't know it was wrong. Talking about any kind of an ethical standard. So is that in the MCEE? You would then go into this document and find what is addressing that, what ethical principle is involved. And if you look at number 1A1, acknowledging that lack of awareness, knowledge, or understanding of the code is not in itself a defense to a charge of unethical conduct. Now, I'm going to encourage all of you to go through each of these points because we don't have time today to go through each one of these, or you should take our PIL course because we will go through this a little more detail. The second principle, responsibility for professional competence. The voice might be, I just teach content in my class. Don't ask me to do anything else. Well, I did have a teacher that once told me that. I was a curriculum leader. And of course, somewhere in principle 2, there should be a standard that covers this, an ethical standard. And here it is. It's under C2, which says, working to engage the school community to close achievement, opportunity, and attainment gaps. That is the job of a professional educator acting in the best interests of all students. And frankly, I tell future teachers, pre-service teachers, you don't teach your subject, you teach children. You are concerned about the whole child. The third one, responsibility to students. I remember my methods classes, they talk about never touch a student. Is that really an ethical standard? And I think that's not really correct. I was a music teacher, an instrumental teacher, and there were times I had to help a student put an instrument on their shoulder or deal with their hand position. And you would find the actual ethical standard under Principle 3A6, engaging in physical contact with students only when there is a clearly defined purpose that benefits the student and continually keeps the safety and well-being of the student in mind. So remember, these aren't black and white like a code of conduct, never touch a student, but these are more of the gray areas and things that are involved in the context of the situation. Another one under responsibility to students. This we hear of the inexperienced students. My students are my friends. And that is dangerous. That's a very bad philosophy or concept. Even if you are well-meaning and you want your students to believe that you are there for them. Where is that in this? Under 3A7, avoiding multiple relationships with students, which might impair objectivity, increase the risk of harm to student learning or well-being, or decrease educator effectiveness. Basically, you make multiple type relationships, you become ambiguous. They don't know how they should respond to you. you are crossing boundaries. The fourth area of responsibility to the school community promotes positive relationships and effective interactions with members of the school community. It's like educators, parents, you name it, while maintaining professional boundaries. The voice I hear. Don't ask for permission, beg for forgiveness. I had a friend who was a band director that said that. I'm just going to go do this and I'll beg for forgiveness if they don't like it. Is that an ethical standard? It isn't. And where is it under 4? 4C3. Professional educator promotes effective and appropriate relationships with the community and other stakeholders by maintaining the highest professional standards of accuracy, honesty, and appropriate disclosure of information when representing the school or district within the community and in public communications. So especially if you're an inexperienced teacher, you don't go off doing your own thing and then find out later on you have to apologize. And the last one is 5, responsible and ethical use of technology. They actually dive into that because this has become an issue for unethical behavior, as we have seen in the news. And what would be the voice? Hey, isn't use of social media forbidden? I can tell you that when MySpace came out, whatever year that was, and the following year, Facebook, I had administrators tell me, don't use this stuff. And then they promptly gave us different applications for using electronic bulletin boards and websites and blackboards and whatever that we did communicate with students in a way like social media under very restrictive and appropriate means. So the true ethical standard is 5A1, using social media responsibly, transparently, and primarily for purposes of teaching and learning per school and district policy. Responsible manner of using it. Now, these are just tiny tidbits of what we could cover in the MCEE. But one of the things we do in our workshops is we approach the Connecticut State Department of Education team. I forgot what those letters stand for. I don't know, Tom, if you remember, but it's their module 5. Respected it and something.
No.
I stumped Tom. Okay. This is interactive discussion is key. That's basically what that stands for. And to fulfill their module 5 for their teachers in Connecticut, teachers must engage in district facilitated conversations that focus on ethical and professional dilemmas and their professional responsibility to students, the larger school district educational community, and to families. And what this gives us a chance to do is to take either a small little scenario or a large state case study. It could be fictitious, hypothetical, or it could be a real case study, and really analyze it and analyze all the different aspects of it with such things with these ground rules. Read the fact scenario and respond to their 4 discussion questions I will share in a minute. The fact scenario and the discussion questions are modeled upon those first written by CSDE. We've modified them a little bit. And work through the questions using collective viewpoints of the people in your group. This works best in a small group where people can sit there and be free to just discuss their opinions. And you may not all agree. We're doing this on Zoom meetings. We use a breakout room. And then after we come back and report to the larger group, we might have to say, hey, we had some disagreement. We had some divergent of opinion. These were our opinions about these questions.
Oh, I think it stands for teacher education and mentoring.
Thank you. Acronyms. We have more acronyms in education than I think anybody else does except government.
That's true.
Or attorneys, maybe. I don't. Anyway, our discussion questions under the CSDE are: what possible issues and concerns might this scenario raise? How could this situation become a violation of a school entity policy? The Pennsylvania, and in this case for us, the Pennsylvania Code of Conduct. This could be a regulation, rule, or law. And then you see in large letters, I said N or MCEE. So we could take a scenario and look for those points that we just went over really quickly and find out how is this a violation or not a recommendation of following. And number 3, the question is, in this situation, what are some of the potential negative consequences for the educator students, fellow educators, and the school community at large. What could happen if this behavior happens, if this scenario happens? And then finally, this is probably most important for discussion that will actually do the best good. What responses and actions will result in a more positive outcome, and or what proactive measures might be considered? So if we're doing a workshop, Tom has really put together some really good workshops. You should look on his website. We would then break them out for 10, 15 minutes at the most and let them reply to the educators in the breakout room to talk about these issues. So we thought, just to give you a little teaser, we're going to pull one of the case studies out of our classes. It's an interactive peer discussion, which incidentally works really well if you are a school system leader, maybe creating a PLC, an ethics committee, an opportunity for educators to meet on a regular basis to talk about these kinds of case studies or hypothetical situations. This one's called the Study Hall Teacher. And we'll give you the one, and then we'll tease you a little bit at the end. How about Thomas, you help me with this page?
Yeah, I'll be glad to read it. I just say that some of it is fictitious, but some of it is also based upon actual cases that went to the commission for educator discipline. So this is based upon the improper use of technology. First off, Mr. K was an 8th grade middle school English teacher who had a 5th period study hall with 8th graders in classroom 214 every day. He was responsible to help students with English homework also. Students were permitted to go to the library with Mr. K's permission, and room 214 only had one school computer. After 5th period class on November 12, 3 students from the class, LP, DR, and RB, visited the school office to talk about Mr. K's behavior during class. They spoke to Principal Z. LP reported he had asked Mr. K to go to the library to get a book to help him read better. LP had Mr. K for class and had difficulty reading. Mr. K refused to send LP to the library, saying, "You only want to go there to talk with your friends."
DR went up to Mr. K to turn in a late assignment. She waited for over 2 minutes for Mr. K to speak to her because he was on Facebook trading fantasy football players. DR went on to say that RB went to speak to Mr. K and came back very upset, almost crying. RB said she asked Mr. K to use the bathroom. RB is a transgender student now identifying as a girl. RB said that when asked, she asked to use the bathroom. Mr. K said, "I'm sending you to the boys, not girls' bathroom." Principal Z contacted the district's IT director. The IT director confirmed that the school's laptop in room 214 was logged into Facebook for 30 minutes during the 5th period on November 12th.
So we would then...
Principal Z met privately with Mr. K. Mr. K stated he knew LP was going to only to goof off. When Principal Z confronted him with the Facebook information, Mr. K stated that he did check his Facebook page to check for a message from his wife. He was not on more than 5 minutes. Regarding RB, Mr. K stated a student changing their gender goes against his personal morals. Principal Z then explained Mr. K's behavior was in conflict with the standards in the Model Code of Ethics for Educators. Mr. K replied, he was unaware of what that was. Principal Z explained it was a code of ethics adopted by the Pennsylvania Department of Education. Principal Z then explained to Mr. K that all teachers were going to attend an in-service program to learn about MCEE the following week. Mr. K asked Principal Z if the MCEE was in the union contract signed 3 years prior. Principal Z said no. Mr. K said, then I don't need to learn about it. I wince. Tom created that. That's obviously a fictitious one. You put that many things in there that are wrong, right, Thomas? And I wince anyway because of the fact that it lacks so much of professionalism. Do educators know they're professionals, that people respect their judgment and would expect things because of that from their judgment? Well, these were the 4 questions we discussed. And right now, if you were in one of our classes, we would cut you loose and we'd ask you to find what elements of the MCEE were in conflict with that scenario. And you would have the fact scenario in front of you so that you could really talk about each individual one. The focus, though, on my session of MCEE was about the principles of MCEE, and every single one of those principles were involved in that scenario. So they should be able to find the teaser is using social media as responsibly, transparently, and primarily for purpose of teaching. That's one. And how about 3B2, respecting the dignity, worth, and uniqueness of each individual student. And you can read the rest of that. That's just two of them. There were easily a dozen or more principles that were, if you want to call them violations of ethics, were happening. So that's what we plan to do in our workshops. And we hope you have an opportunity to go to this document and take a closer look. This true, honest to goodness model code of ethics for educators, for all educators, help us in our professional decision making. So that concludes my presentation for today, session 2. I hope you're looking forward to session 3, which will be on June 13th at 4:30 p.m., where Thomas will be leading the discussion on the Code of Professional Practice and Conduct. Now, that's the Code of Conduct for Pennsylvania educators. And we'd like to encourage you also to go to this website, www.twbaileylaw.com. There's a lot of interesting material there, including an educator blog and court cases and other issues, other fact scenarios. And we've also just announced our next PIL course that we're going to do in the new school year in September 19th, 26th, and October 3rd, 12th for school system leaders and administrators. Thomas, anything more to add to this?
No, I appreciate what you've done, Paul, and I hope that people get an introduction to the Model Code of Ethics for Educators. In our classes so far, we have heard that many of the educators are very honest and say they hadn't heard of the MCE. And some of them said they've heard of the PA Code of Conduct, but they don't really know what's in it. So perhaps these sessions will help.
We're looking forward to seeing you guys. Hey, spread the word. We love it. Thanks very much. Have a wonderful day.